Yeah, 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 5 to 7, page 1220 in the Church Bible. In the same way, you who are younger, submit yourselves to the elders. All of you, clothe yourselves with humility towards one another, because God opposes the proud, but shows favour to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's almighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. Cast all your anxieties on him, because he cares for you.
It's reckoned that over 100 billion items of clothing are produced every year. That's a lot, isn't it? 100 billion items every year. That's the equivalent of, if you know, everyone in the world, that's equivalent of 12.5 items per person. The number of items produced, clothing items produced annually, has doubled since 2000. Now that is impressive, isn't it? That has doubled since 2000. And there's all sorts of things that you could say about that, couldn't we? We could talk about, of course, the jobs and employment that are involved in that, the industry, the clothing industry itself. You could more negatively say that those clothes, though they might be average 12.5 per person, they're probably disproportionately spread around the world. And there's a lot of wastage and landfills filled with clothing and all of that. Here in the UK, the average adult has 118 pieces of clothing in their wardrobe. You might hear that and think, well, I've got more than that, or I don't know, I've not got as many as that. And every now and again you have a clear out, don't you? I guess, you have a look through, think, I think there's a few things that we need to get rid of here, and you might get rid of a few, you might give a few away to charity, you might go to one of those ones. That's what I tend to do. I don't have time to go to the charity shop, just bung it in there and hope that it gets to someone who needs it. I put that one up there because it's actually North Norfolk District Council. That was there for Will Andy Bridges, but I don't think he's here today anyway. There we are. But sometimes you might go and chuck out, you might have a clear through, a sort through your wardrobe. And Peter here in 1 Peter chapter 5 says, as you do that, as you go through the wardrobe, as it were, as you're going through different things, maybe keeping some and getting rid of other things, amongst those things in there somewhere, there ought to be one item of clothing. It's sort of maybe towards the back a bit. It's not very big and it's not very loud or kind of in your face, if you like. It's not particularly smart. It's not particularly noticeable, and it's called humility. That's what Peter says in our passage, isn't it? It's humility. Where all of us, verse 5, middle of verse 5, all of you clothe yourselves with humility towards one another. That's the big picture here, isn't it? Now, the Bible does have stuff to say about what we actually physically wear. The Bible does talk about that we are to dress modestly as Christians. And so the God does have something to say about the physical clothes that we wear, for sure. But here, and with Paul elsewhere as well, the author picks up this picture of clothing. And Peter says that we're to clothe ourselves with humility. That's the big focus and the big application for us this morning. Jerry Bridges, in his book, The Blessing of Humility, right at the beginning, he says he reckons that humility is the second most taught trait in the New Testament for us. In terms of commands and examples given, obviously love comes first. Love kind of wins. So there are about 50 ways he can see in which we're commanded to love each other, commanded to love, or given an example of loving, if you like, that 50 times. But then humility is either directly commanded, taught, or there's an example given about 40 times in the New Testament. It's foundational. J.C. Ryle, who was a vicar not far from here in various places, he said that humility is the very first letter in the alphabet of Christianity. Jerry Bridges recognises in his book that actually humility is something that's hardly sort of taught about, written about in Christian books or taught about in churches. And I think part of that, he says that he thinks part of that is because We all fall short in this area, don't we? And it's hard to teach on the subject of humility. You don't want to appear to be saying, look at me, I'm so humble, right? And as a 35-year-old pastor, I'm aware of the dynamics of that. It's just a bit weird, isn't it? Like, am I an example of, well, not particularly, but I get that. But it's here, isn't it? It's in the passage for us, and it seems to be the main focus. What is humility? What is humility? Tim Keller, drawing on the work of C.S. Lewis, makes a very helpful observation about humility. Rick shared this with us a number of weeks ago when we were looking at chapter 3. Keller writes a book called The Freedom of Self-Forgetfulness. And that's kind of what he's saying, that humility is self-forgetfulness. He says the essence of gospel humility is not thinking more of myself. We know that, I think, don't we? Or thinking less of myself. It is thinking of myself less. Do you see that? It's not obvious. We know it's not thinking more of myself. That's pride, isn't it? But it's not actually thinking less of always doing myself down. I'm just rubbish at everything. What can I offer? What can I? But actually, that's not humility. And often, sometimes, lurking behind that can be a shed load of pride. But actually, humility is just not thinking of myself that much at all, I guess, because I'm so taken up with the God who made me and the people around me. And so that's what Keller describes there. We've all met that person, haven't we, that wonderful person who you spend time with them, and then you come away, and at the end of it all, you think, hold on a minute, I didn't get a chance to ask them about them. You know, they were so interested in asking me and so giving me their attention and so focused on my life or my needs or whatever, and you just suddenly the penny drops and you realise that they just gave themselves humbly to listen and to serve and were so absorbed with you rather than with themselves. So Peter says, clothe yourselves with humility. How are we going to do that? 4 very practical things that we'll just kind of work our way through this morning from this passage. The first one is alphas to elders. It's there at the beginning of verse 5. In the same way, says Peter, you who are younger, submit yourselves to your elders. Now, really, this little phrase belongs with what we saw last week. We were talking about the elders, weren't we? They were leading the church through fire. And so Peter now talks to the younger people in the church in relation to those elders. And you can kind of imagine the situation, can't you? The elders were leading the church through fiery times, all sorts of persecution and pressures on the church. And in that moment, you can imagine the scenario. Some of the younger folks in the church might have become contemptuous towards those elders. You know, they got cross with them, they got annoyed with them, or they thought they weren't taking the church in the right direction, or whatever it is, or not handling the situation well. And so they might be getting a bit annoyed with the elders. The elders may well have been overbearing and clunky with the younger folks in the church. So in verse 3 we saw last week, didn't we? Peter said to the elders, shepherds of the flock. He said, not lording it over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. And there was this picture of the elders amongst the church, alongside shepherding. And so he's tackled that there in verse 3, and then in verse 5 he addresses the younger ones. He says, look, you who are younger, submit yourselves to your elders. Why does he put alphas to elders? What's all that about? It's the generations thing, isn't it? You know, different generations. There's the silent generation, and then there's the baby boomers and Gen X and the millennials and Gen Z. This language gets used all the time, doesn't it, online and so on, and in conversations. The different generations. The alphas are the really young ones. The beta, they haven't been born yet, have they? That's 2026 to 2040, so they're not with us yet. But the alphas are kind of kids and teenagers up to about the age of 16. Now, I think if Peter was here with us today, he'd be talking to the alphas, to Gen Z. Go on, put your hand up if you're Gen Z. You were born between 97 and 2010. Any, yeah, you guys. And then millennials. That's some in there, yeah. So there's a few of us millennials about as well. Sorry, millennials 81 to 96. Yeah, no, that's okay. So there's a few. So I think he'd be talking to all of us. Yeah, it's a kind of loose thing, isn't it? But the younger ones, and he's saying to them, you've got to submit to the elders who God has placed over you. Actually, the word there for younger, the word for young is it can mean new or fresh. So maybe you're feeling fresh or fresh-faced this morning. I don't know what that means for us elders. We're like not fresh. We're like, I don't know what we look like. But there's this thing of the different generations serving together in the church. And Peter very gently just reminds the younger ones to submit to the elders, humbly submitting to those that God has given and to lead and to care for you. So that's the first thing. Really belongs with last week. And then the next thing, perhaps the main thing, here is all to each other. It's a slightly different direction, isn't it? The middle of the verse, as I just read, all of you clothe yourselves with humility towards one another. Now, you might think that humility is a kind of more of a vertical thing. It's me and my relationship with the Lord. You know, it's me on my own in the quiet reading my Bible or praying to God and confessing my pride to Him or whatever. It's kind of in that relationship. And of course, that's absolutely right. You know, part of our humility is in relation to God. But you know, so much of how humility is worked out is at this level, isn't it? At the horizontal level. That we're called to be humble towards each other. And so much of our Christian lives is worked out in relationships together as we relate to each other in different ways. What does this actually mean? Okay, clothe yourselves with humility towards one another. But Peter, what does that mean? You know, for me, practically in the church, what does that mean? I think there's a really helpful definition in Philippians 2. Verse 3, it's a chapter which is saturated in Jesus' humility as he came down to live and to die for us. And Paul's talking about that there. And in Philippians 2 verse 3 he says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, rather, and here it comes, in humility value others above yourselves. That's a way of grounding this. How am I humble towards other people? Value them more than me. Value them more than me. Maybe you're in a work meeting next week. Humility will be that you value the others in the meeting more than yourself. It is, I think, you are more important than me. And I say that quite literally right now. You are more important than me. In this little moment here, this little preaching moment, it's just a little sermon that I've cobbled together. And in this moment, you ought to be, you are more important than me. When you come through the door, the person, perhaps Eddie or someone else, welcomes you on the door, at the point that they welcome you, it's partly a way of saying, look, you are more important than me. Let me welcome you in. Let me show you, there's the loos and there's, you know, do you need a drink? Or you are more important than me. In our growth groups, in the life of the church family, you meet together, maybe you're discussing a particular subject, a whole different motley crew, different bunch of people in the room talking together. And humility in that moment is going in our hearts and in the way we talk and what we say or what we don't or whatever it is. You are more important than me in this conversation. That has all sorts of implications, doesn't it, practically, for how we relate to each other, pray for each other. And maybe you're on a team in the life of the church. You know, you turn up and you arrive and you're setting up mini music or the community meal or coffee and cake. So it was Friends on Friday, wasn't it? Or Kids Club or Friday Club. Humility will be worked out there as you turn up and you're cracking on with everyone around you. You are more important than me. The team, the others, they're more important than me. The people that come through the door, you're more important than me. I think that's something of what Peter has in mind here. Our deacons, as they get to work, and these new guys, as they begin their work as deacons with Ian and Ben together, what's going to be the operating principle for how they do stuff? Well, it's going to be, you are more important than me. How can I serve you? And that has to be the same for each one of us, doesn't it? They said of the late Queen Elizabeth II that when she talked with you, it was like you were the only person in the room or the crowd. You think there's massive crowds of people all flocking to see the Queen, and there's people all along here, and there's a copper there, but as she talks to this person right here, it's as if they're all gone, and she's just talking to this. And there's something, whether you agree with that estimation of her or not for sure, but there's something about that, isn't there? May that be the case. May that be the case that when someone is talking with us, it's like they're the only person in the room, and actually the most important person in the room at that moment. And what's the reason that Peter gives for this thing, which has so many implications for the whole of our lives, doesn't it? Comes towards the end of the verse. He says, because, always watch that, because, okay, what's the reason? God opposes the proud, but shows favour to the humble. It's taken from Proverbs chapter 3, isn't it? God opposes the proud, but shows favour to the humble. You know, there have been times in my life, many times, when I've felt a bit deflated. You all have that, don't we? Sometimes you feel a little bit deflated about something, or, that was hard or whatever. And there have been times in my life where, if I'm honest, I've felt quite defeated. Sometimes in a particular area of life, or just in like 5 or 6, sometimes that's how it goes, isn't it? You just feel the weight of all of that. And there are 1,000,001 different reasons why that happens sometimes. We feel defeated in our lives, maybe in working life or family life, maybe it's money or whatever it might be, whatever area of our lives, or a few at the same time. There's all sorts of reasons why we might feel defeated. We live in a broken world. It's so messed up, isn't it? And so much goes wrong in relationships and in our bodies, in our health. And I think when we feel like that, sometimes it ought to be pause for thought. It ought to be pause for thought. If we feel blocked, if we feel opposed, could it be a warning light on the dashboard of life? Because you see, God opposes the proud, but shows grace and favour to the humble. Now, I appreciate that's complicated, and maybe you're suffering today. It's got nothing to do with your pride at all. Someone sinned against you, something went wrong this week, whatever it might be. But sometimes, just sometimes, that sense of frustration is a little light on the dashboard. God opposes the proud, and he shows grace and favour to the humble. We're to be humble towards each other in the life of the church. The third thing is this: all under him. That's where Peter goes next, isn't it? He says, humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand. What does that mean, his mighty hand? It's language taken from Exodus, the second book of the Bible. We looked at this a number of years ago, and God's bringing his people out of Egypt, that mighty hand of rescue and redemption. And I think here Peter picks that up. And it's a little more here to do with an acceptance of all that comes from his hand, of all that comes in our lives from our Father's mighty hand, including trials and troubles. These people here, they were being humiliated for their Christian faith, and in part of that perhaps were being humbled as well. And the challenge for them then, and it's the same for us, is to accept even those things as from his mighty and fatherly hand. It's what we saw in the evenings earlier on in the summer, isn't it? Joseph, the story of Joseph, that actually even those things that were intended for evil against him, even those things, God intended for good. They came from his fatherly hand, and as hard as it was, they came with that fatherly love, that fatherly discipline. And it behoves us as Christians to accept those things, as hard as that is, and to see what the Lord might be teaching us through them. And sometimes he is removing our pride, removing our reliance on ourselves or other people or other things, stripping it away and moving us to clothe ourselves with humility. I'll refer to the song that I mentioned in that series, talking about this idea of, whatever comes our way, it comes from his hand. And that's hard, isn't it? And I shared this from a particular season of my life where this was very pertinent. It's the hymn, Whatever My God Ordains Is Right. 2 verses. Whatever my God ordains is right, his holy will abideth. I will be still whate'er he does, and follow where he guideth. He is my God, though dark my road, he holds me that I shall not fall. And so to him I leave it all. And so to him I leave it all. Whatever my God ordains is right, here shall my stand be taken. Though sorrow, need, or death be mine, yet I am not forsaken. My Father's care is round me there. He holds me that I shall not fall. And so to him I leave it all. And so to him I leave it all. Now, don't just say that. I do know what that will mean for some of you, many of you, some of whom I've even met with this week. It's hard, isn't it? But it's true and it's right and it's good. It's another way of saying what Tim drew our attention to at the end of chapter 4 there, isn't it? Chapter 4, verse 19. So then those who suffer according to God's will should commit themselves to their faithful Creator and continue to do good. And Peter says that there'll be a time when we will be lifted up. You might be right down here somewhere at the moment, but he says that we will be lifted up in the verse, doesn't he? At the end of verse 6 there, that he may lift you up in due time. That there's this pattern of being, if you like, humbled and then exalted, of going down and then coming up again. It's Nike, isn't it? Or Nike, I don't know how you pronounce it, but it's that, isn't it? Actually, so much of the Christian life is that we go down first before we come up again. Just like Jesus. He came down to this miserable, broken world full of sadness and pain. He came down into ordinary people's lives and situations, to the least and the lowest and the lost and the littlest. He came down even to death on a cross. He came down to burial in a cold, dark tomb. And then he rose again. He's ascended on high and he's seated at the right hand of the Father, and one day he will come to judge the living and the dead, and his kingdom will never end. But first he went down, and so often it is in our lives, isn't it, that we go down first before. The title of this sermon is Humility Before Honour. Humility before honour. And so often that is the pattern for our lives, isn't it? When will we be lifted up? Peter says we'll be lifted up. Is it in this life? I think sometimes, yeah. Sometimes you, in a season of life, you go down and then the Lord brings you up again out of that in some way. Or it might not be out of it, but through it and beyond. And it could be that. But for some things in our lives, when will I be lifted up? The reality is in the next. In glory, when Jesus Christ is revealed, when, as Peter would put it, when he is glorified, I will be glorified with him, and that's where I'll be lifted up. Last week was the cross before the crown, wasn't it? This week is humility before honour. And then the final thing is anxiety upon him. That's where Peter goes, isn't it? So we've had this verse about humility, humbling ourselves under his hand, verse 6. And then verse 7, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Now actually that word cast there is what we call, it's a participle. So it's casting. So he's just told us about humbling ourselves under God's mighty hand, and then he just says, casting your anxiety on. So how do we humble ourselves under his hand? Well, part of it is we cast our worries, we cast our cares, we cast our anxieties on him. That's part of how we humble ourselves before him. You know, so often we're rushing around, aren't we? Rushing and rushing, this thing, that thing, the next thing, on and on and on it goes. One thing to the next, carrying, bearing, shouldering, holding, being burdened by all the burdens and all the troubles and all the sadnesses and all the difficulties and all the complexity. I don't know what to do about that. And we're carrying it. Sometimes it's one thing, but often it's quite a few, isn't it? And we're just carrying and carrying and carrying. I'm terrible for this. This is like, Rich 101. This is my worst thing. Oh, I've got this. Oh, I've got this covered. I've got this sorted. I'll hold on to this. I'll get through this. No, you haven't, Earl. No, you won't. Not without him. Not without him. Carrying. It takes great humility to get off the treadmill and stop doing, producing and gaining or getting or doing or whatever it might be, delivering, box ticking, virtue signalling or whatever it is, and to come before the Lord and not to carry anymore, but to cast it all on him. It takes great humility to do that, doesn't it? And we all get wound up in that, and sometimes we just got to stop and cast it all on him again. So go home, not right now. I mean, you're free to, because it's a free country, isn't it? But not right. But go home, each one of us. Go home and get on your knees before the Lord, the faithful Creator, the one whose hand is mighty and it's for you as well. And be real with him. Don't put on because he already knows, doesn't he? Don't get the doilies out. He doesn't need those. Be real with him and do business with the Lord and cast it all on him today. Folks, we've got to cast all those burdens off of us because we can't sustain them or hold them. And then we've got to clothe ourselves. We've got to put on humility towards one another because God opposes the proud, but he shows grace, he shows favour, he gives strength, and he gives help to the humble. Let's pray. Perhaps just take a moment just to spot that thing that you are carrying that needs to be cast. Or maybe that way that you could, as I could, see that person as more important than me. Father in heaven, you are our faithful Creator. All of your plans for us are good, even when we go through fiery trials and troubles. And Father, you would have us humble before you, bowed as creatures and as your children. And Father in heaven, I pray in your mercy that you do work in each one of us, from our hearts, from the inside out. Move us to humble ourselves before you. Move us to humble ourselves before each other. Help us to consider others of much greater worth and importance than ourselves. And Father, help us, we pray, to cast all of those cares upon you, our Father who cares for us. For we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.